this is a path where it's about gaining insight into the nature of reality, gaining clear seeing into the miraculous essence that's always present in every moment of being alive. So we're not trying to go deep somewhere away from life or away from reality. We're trying to go deep into the heart of reality that's vibrating in every created thing in every moment. And to know that and be engaged in life from this luminous, expansive, profound, wise, loving consciousness.
Welcome to Meditation Changes Everything with spiritual teacher Craig Hamilton, a podcast exploring the deeper potentials of meditation practice and how it can change every aspect of human life. In this episode, Craig explores an often misunderstood aspect of the spiritual path, the difference between deep meditative states and true spiritual awakening. Many of us have experienced a quiet stillness, blissful contentment, or even a deep trance in meditation. These altered states can feel powerful and profound, but are they really signs of spiritual progress? Across 3 segments, Craig unpacks why these meditative states, while valuable, are not the goal of meditation. Instead, he points us toward a more conscious and engaged form of practice, one that opens the door to direct awakening. In our first segment, Craig looks at the pros and cons of the powerful state of concentration traditionally referred to as samadhi. We hope you enjoy the show. Here's Craig.
So samadhi is the Sanskrit word for trance, and it was in the Pali canon, the Buddhist canon. The word was shamatha, similar word. If you look at the spelling, shamatha or samadhi. And these are the deep kind of states that the early yogis who were really doing intense meditation were trying to get into, because they felt that the mind was an obstacle to awakening, and they were trying to get beyond the mind, and they would go into these very deep states of consciousness, of kind of inner bliss and concentration and intense depth and inner peace and tranquility that are they're very pleasant. They're very still and quiet and filled with a kind of pregnant silence and vibrational power. And in fact, they're so filled with power that some of the early martial artists and warriors in East Asia would do these samadhi practices, these concentration practices, to try to get more power to take into battle. They felt they would create samadhi power. They would harness the energies of the universe to then become a more powerful fighter. So, the power metaphor it's not just a metaphor, at least in those traditions. But anyway, these deep inner states, and often this is what some of us have come to think of when we think of meditation. It's about going into this totally deep, still, silent, powerful, present, tranquil place of potent, energized inner peace, right? But those are called samadhi states, and they're not really the goal of the spiritual path, and certainly a path like this, which is about spiritual awakening to our true nature, to our enlightened essence, or what's been called our Buddha nature. This is a path where it's about gaining insight into the nature of reality, gaining clear seeing into the miraculous essence that's always present in every moment of being alive. So we're not trying to go deep somewhere away from life or away from reality. We're trying to go deep into the heart of reality that's vibrating in every created thing in every moment. And to know that and be engaged from life, in life from this luminous, expansive, profound, wise, loving consciousness. But these samadhi states, these intense trance states of depth, can happen to us when we're doing any kind of meditation. A lot of the meditations we're doing here, they're not designed to bring about samadhi states, except maybe when you've done some of the concentration practices of following the breath that I sometimes teach as a foundational practice. That's a samadhi type practice. But in the traditions over time, as they got more subtle in their kind of understanding of what awakening and enlightenment was and how does meditation support it, often the discussion was, well, we don't want to go into samadhi too much, maybe a little, but we don't really want to disappear into these deep trance states because there's no ability to gain insight when you're that deeply still and there's nothing happening and there's no content. There's just silence in all directions. There's no knowing, there's no wisdom capacity, there's no spark happening. Therefore, there can't be enlightenment. There can't be illumination of your understanding, of your worldview, of your personality, of your engagement. Because there's no engagement. There's just depth, infinite stillness. So the traditions started to not emphasize samadhi practice as much, or they would say, well, you do that to gain some concentration and some foundations in letting go of the world, but then we're going to not go very deep into that so that we can stay with the practices leading to insight, to wisdom, to enlightenment. The point is that this can occur at any point on your path in any meditation, and it can, for many of us, become a distraction from, or a detour would probably be a better word, from the practice and from the goal of the practice. And so we want to always be aware, and you've heard me, many of you have been around for a while, have heard me talk with people about this, or people have asked questions about it, and I've spoken a bit about it. And we just want to be aware that stillness is not the goal. Deep inner quietude, absence of thought and absence of content is not where we're trying to get to, but it can occur. And, we don't want to make it a negative thing either, but we want to stay with the practice so that we don't just spiral down into the infinite depths of no mind and pure consciousness and then just rest there and take up residence there. Because here's the thing, it can feel like the goal, or it can feel like, it can certainly feel like a place to stop on the path. Especially if we don't fully understand the path and then awakening and what we're really up to, what we're really aiming for. There's a very seductive, alluring aspect to deep samadhi states. And so this is just something to be aware of. It's not something to be afraid of. It's not something, it's, again, worse, let's put it this way, a lot worse things could be going on in your meditation than that you're getting lost in deep samadhi or deep trance, okay? You could just be sitting and, struggling endlessly to try to quiet your mind, or you could be, endlessly lost in processing the day's events or planning for the future and, or very emotionally disturbed. So, a lot of things you could be up to in meditation that would be a lot worse than just getting deep in the samadhi, deep trance state. But we're practitioners, we're serious, mature spiritual practitioners who are working to find the subtlety of discrimination, discernment, to really, separate the real from the unreal, to find the very subtle essence of things. It's the essence of all things. It's equally the essence of stillness, just as it is equally the essence of motion and dynamism and activity. It's not found more in stillness than in action. That's the thing we're trying to discover and learn how to stay attuned to enlivened by, immersed in, awake to the mysterious spiritual diamond-like essence. The sacred, luminous, vibrant consciousness that interpenetrates every single thing without exception. To be able to see that in everything. The goal of the spiritual path is not to have no mind. It's not to have no thought. And it's not to negate all the wisdom and knowledge that we've accumulated that helps us navigate the world. But it's to come to a place where we are no longer identified with the mind. We're no longer attached to knowing, to our certainties and stories. Where we're no longer invested in what we know. Where we don't really need to know. We're discovering a way of living where we don't need to have any certainty to sort of leap forward into each new moment and circumstance and situation and challenge, opportunity. Where our heart is wide open. And we're an enthusiastic yes. Regardless of how much we already know, what our level of certainty already is. But there's perhaps nothing that we can do that has as radical an impact as the meditation practice of letting go of the mind entirely. In other words, there's almost nothing we can do that will create a more enlightened relationship to the mind than sitting still for a period of time every day and having no involvement with thought. Severing our identification with the mind. See, because we don't have to do anything when we're meditating, it gives us a rare opportunity to simply give up any involvement with thought. But in meditation, we can give it up, let it go. And it's a very direct path to awakening, because when consciousness is freed from its fixation on the mind, even for a moment, it instantly begins to know something else. It becomes aware of the mystery of its own nature. Consciousness becomes aware of consciousness. You become aware of something infinite. The infinite, miraculous depth of your own true being beyond the mind.
In our next segment, Craig responds to a question from a course participant that often arises for experienced meditators. If I keep slipping into the same deep, peaceful state every time I meditate, is that a sign of progress? Or might I be getting stuck in a rut? Craig unpacks the difference between altered states and true awakening, and offers guidance on how to stay more fully conscious in practice, even when the experience feels good.
So you're saying that even though the practices can differ a lot, like here right now we're focusing on letting go of the mind, don't give attention to the mind, and then another practice is just let everything be as it is and don't, and embrace everything, or another practice is pay attention to consciousness itself. That no matter what practice you do, your meditation's exactly the same. So I have a take. And I need, you need to take what I'm going to share lightly enough that you don't let it kind of wildly disrupt the positive momentum of your practice. Because look, so from one point of view, the fact that you're describing that, hey, whenever I meditate, pretty much I have an experience of some kind of depth. I have an experience of some kind of deepening and opening, and it's positive, and it feels like I get the sense that it's a break from the ordinary for you, and it's you're touching something. So something real is happening. I can tell you, there are people here today listening to that who say, wow, I wish I had that happen every time I meditate. Like we have lots of different experiences. So that I want to say is there's positive momentum to your practice. That's good. But I have the sense that, and this, by the way, happens to a lot of meditators, is particularly those who are able to sort of easily access, easily access altered states of consciousness, which, by the way, it's just sort of a typological thing in us human beings. It's not necessarily a sign of great spiritual, being spiritually advanced or the opposite if you can't. So, for instance, some of us just have easy access to altered states of consciousness. It's just like some of us are very easily hypnotized. You go to a hypnotherapist and boom, they can hypnotize you like that. Or, you can just learn a meditation practice and boom, have a kind of altered state experience. Some of us are that way. Others of us don't tend to have much access to altered states, but that doesn't mean we can't gain the fruits of meditation, because meditation is not really, at least in this way, in an enlightenment context, it's not really about altered states of consciousness. So people who tend to have easy access to altered states, and I'm getting this kind of sense might be what's happening for you, what will often happen is they'll start to meditate, and then there's like this groove in consciousness that's there, and they just slot into this altered state. We just slip into this altered state, whatever we do. Because see, you're saying whether I'm doing this or I'm doing that or I'm doing the other, these practices are, very different in some ways than one another. Doesn't matter. I just flow into this place, and I kind of am, somewhat conscious, but somewhat unconscious, it sounds like. You don't really know sometimes where it went. You just know you were in this deep place. So this, by the way, because some of you were asking about my use of the term samadhi in this month's workshop, which I haven't spoken much about before, and samadhi, which in the traditions means, well, it means two things. In the Indian tradition, it means where you're buried. But it also means more primarily, it means deep states of trance, deep states of absorption, where you just get really deeply absorbed, ultimately to sometimes the point of really there's no consciousness there. You're just deeply in this trance. And a lot of meditation and yogic practices were about achieving these very deep states of trance and absorption. And then along came the Enlightenment teachings, which were like, well, let's not get too lost in states of trance and absorption. They're nice. They definitely touch into spiritual depth, but they're not giving us insight into the nature of reality. They're not necessarily deconstructing our ego and awakening us to who we are beyond the mind. That's more of a kind of profound insight process that we need enough consciousness and enough presence to be able to access. So then, most of the Enlightenment traditions tried to steer us away from too much trance and more toward being very awake and present every moment of the practice. So we're really starting to see in deeper and more subtle ways, like what's the ego, what's the mind, what's consciousness, and that's starting to, it's a kind of awakening or insight process. So for you, I'm saying I feel like you're one of the folks who can easily get into this kind of trance-like state, and it's positive and it's good, but the fact that it's the same every time is the clear signal to me that it's kind of taking you away from some of the more profound parts of the practice. And so I would encourage you to, and again, this is why I say you got to kind of hold this lightly. You've got to work with it. Don't like bring it like a wrecking ball into your meditation and try to like, oh, I've just got to totally. It's not really like that. But I want to invite you to bring more energy and attention to the staying awake and present and conscious component of this, and really try to bring a lot of, like, don't let yourself slip, even because if you really study it, you can notice, oh, it feels good when I go there. It's wooing me in, and you have to kind of, no, I'm not going there this time. It's fine. I might start to experience that, but no, I'm just going, I'm going to relate to that trance state, that those positive, subtle feelings. I'm going to relate to those just like thoughts. They're just alluring, drawing me in, and I'm instead staying with this practice. I'm not going to identify with that. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to resist it, but I'm not going to preference it. I'm not going to let it sweep me away. And see if you can kind of find somewhere else by just staying with the practice that you're doing that day, that time, whatever it is, and really say, no, I'm staying. Yes, that feels really good, but no, I'm doing this practice, and I'm going to really try to stay with that and see where that could take me that's different.
Throughout this episode, Craig has been exploring the difference between altered states and true awakening. In this last segment, he highlights how even the most peaceful states, like stillness or inner silence, can become distractions if we lose consciousness in them rather than meeting them with awareness.
Karen had a couple questions that she posted, and I'll just briefly touch on without reading it because it's pretty in-depth. But first one, she's just saying that when she follows these meditation prompts, she experiences, she says, what I can only describe as nothing, a kind of spaciousness and darkness. Feels like I've really stepped away into an abyss. And feels like an ineffable quality of awareness. And she's wondering how that relates to samadhi or trance. And really, she's wondering, is it okay for that to be the result of this practice, that it just feels like kind of an abyss or a nothing or a kind of darkness, spaciousness? I mean, or she's wondering, should I have more kind of content present? I think that conceptual stillness or nothingness isn't the goal of spiritual practice or meditation. It's more of an inner freedom in the face of whatever arises, as opposed to a cessation of content. So we're not looking for thought to cease. We're looking to experience freedom regardless of whether our thoughts are coming and going. Freedom from the mind, not freedom from having a mind. Because the point is, it's not that any particular experience is good or bad or problem, but just to know that nothingness, or if you fall into that kind of stillness, that's not a goal to kind of aim toward or cling to or try to stay in. It's almost like you want to relate to that phenomenon
as just as any other phenomenon, and let it go and try to stay focused, awake, and present, because falling into trance or samadhi tends to be a kind of losing consciousness a little bit. We're kind of going out of consciousness into this kind of deep, still, kind of non-conceptual trance state. And so it's kind of like, well, if that's happening, you might be, you think of it as akin to or analogous to falling asleep. It's not falling asleep. That's a deep trance, I guess you could say, a deep samadhi or whatever is falling asleep. But yeah, so it's kind of like, you don't want to just fall into that and just disappear into it. You want to stay this active, present, conscious agent. And then if that's what's occurring in your meditation, that's fine. Okay, that's occurring, but you're still here, present, conscious, aware. My inkling is that if you are staying conscious, present, awake, aware, and not just drifting into something, that experience will probably come and go. It will probably arise some of the time, and then you'll have a different experience. And you won't be clinging to it, and you won't be fixating on it, and so it will just be part of the ebb and flow of experience.
This podcast is supported by our paying members in Craig's Awakened Life membership program. When you join the Awakened Life, each month you'll receive in-depth teachings and guidance in the practice of direct awakening, including a meditation workshop, 4 guided meditations, and a live online retreat with Craig. And when you register today, you can receive your first month for 50% off. Go to awakenedlifemembership.com to learn more and enroll. If you enjoyed today's episode, we hope you'll share our show with others. And please subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you have a minute to write a short review on your podcast app, we would deeply appreciate your support. You can stay connected to the show by subscribing to our newsletter at meditationchangeseverything.com. Each week, we'll send you new audios and videos from Craig, and we'll also let you know when we release new episodes of the show. If the approach to meditation we've been exploring today inspires you, you are invited to tune into a 90-minute online workshop Craig will be hosting called Meditation 2.0, The Miracle of Direct Awakening. In the workshop, he'll share a powerful new approach to meditation practice and guide you in a series of brief meditation experiments so you can experience it for yourself. You can listen to that at freemeditationworkshop.com. That's freemeditationworkshop.com. Check out our show notes for links to all the ways you can stay in touch with Craig's work. Meditation Changes Everything is created by Craig Hamilton, Susan Fries, Morgan Dix, Stephanie Murphy, Will Bowman, and Richard Klein. From all of us, thank you for tuning in.